Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. For the friends I haven't met yet, I'm Diane Berke. I'm the founder and spiritual director of One Spirit Learning Alliance. And we're so delighted that you can be here this evening to share a wonderful time together with Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer. I'd like to begin the evening with a short invocation written by Rebecca Edmiston Lang. After the invocation, I'm going to play a piece of music to set the tone for our evening. And as I'm reading the invocation and as the music is playing, please take that time to look at the faces of the people who are here with you tonight. Be sure to scroll through the screens and allow yourself to see all of these beautiful, radiant faces who have come together in community to share an evening of beauty and wisdom. Come into this place. Come in. Come into this place which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes. For here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place.
When I was a boy each week, on Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. And when I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad, miracles don't happen still. But now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips. Now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Child's face, say it's not a testament. That'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come, say it's not a sacrament. I tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush and singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now.
Thank you. Kim Rosen, in her wonderful book, Saved by a Poem, writes, "Nearly every day, poetry saves me. Some favorite line or surprising image will rescue my vagrant attention from the careening bandwagon of my thoughts and redirect it to the path of my soul. My mind quiets, my breath deepens, and I remember what matters most to me." Throughout the past year, that has absolutely been my personal experience. Nearly every day, poetry has saved me. And more than by any other single poet, I've been saved nearly every day by the poems of our very special guest this evening, Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer. I first discovered Rosemary's work through the website gratefulness.org. Through that, I looked for her book. At that time, the most recent one was called Naked for Tea. And I think probably through gratefulness.org, I discovered her blog, 100 Falling Veils. And on the blog, I learned that for many, many years, Rosemary has had a personal practice of writing at least one poem every day, and that she sends out a poem every morning to whoever asks to be on that list. And so every morning since then, I have begun my day with Rosemary's words serving as a compass, directing my attention back to the path of my soul. What an incredible blessing that has been in my life. And what an incredible blessing it is to be able to welcome her to One Spirit this evening and to share her with this very precious and sacred community. Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer co-hosts Emerging Form, which is a podcast on the creative process, Stubborn Praise, an online poetry reading series with James Cruz, Secret Agents of Change, which is a surreptitious kindness cabal, Talking Gourds Poetry Club with Art Goodtimes, and Soul Writers Circle. Her poetry has appeared in O Magazine, On a Prairie Home Companion, and PBS NewsHour, Poetry of Presence, and in her own daily blog, 100 Falling Veils. Rosemary's most recent collection, Hush, won the Halcyon Prize, and her book Naked for Tea was a finalist for the Able Muse Book Award. So please, please welcome Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer. We're so delighted to have you with us.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you. It's a joy to be here. And I thought I'd start in the same vein that Diane said. She mentioned this beautiful book, one of my favorite books by Kim Rosen, Saved by a Poem. And this is one of the poems that saved me. It's a poem by the German mystic, Rainer Maria Rilke. You, darkness that I come from, I love you. More than all the fires that fence in the world. For the fire makes a circle of light for everyone, but then no one outside learns of you. But the darkness pulls in everything, shapes, fires, animals, and myself. How easily it gathers them, powers and people, and it is possible. A great energy is moving near me. I have faith in nights. That's a translation by Robert Bly, and that poem met me at such a tender time when I was in, what we call the dark night of the soul, where everything I thought I knew about myself and the world had fallen apart. And I had read that poem before, but that poem met me again in that moment. And even so, I had loved poems since I was a little girl. And even so, I'd been writing poems for many, many years. That poem met me again in that moment and proved to me what a poem can do, the ways that a poem can meet us and break us open completely. Or I was just reading a poem again today by Jane Hirschfield, Meeting the Light Completely. And she says in that poem that something can ruin our heart. It can ruin our heart. That doesn't exactly sound awesome, does it, at first? But I love what I think she means by this is that poetry, for me, can open the heart so completely, can break it down so completely that it allows it to be rebuilt, that it allows it to reconnect, to re-understand what it is to be in the world. And that was, I suppose, why I thought to call this program Seduced by the Present. I think that the reason that for, I don't even know how many, 15 years or so, that I've been writing a poem a day, it's because over time, I realize how the practice of writing poems has allowed me to fall more deeply in love with the world and to recognize all of the invitations. As the song said that we were listening to earlier, what a beautiful song that was, Holy Now, to notice how everything invites us into the holy now. And certainly that's what writing poems has done for me. And Diane suggested maybe I would talk just a little bit about this practice of writing poems every day and how that began and how it's evolved. And certainly it didn't begin as a spiritual practice. It began very much as a poetry practice. I was writing poems, and I had been writing poems for some time. Oh, and let me just tell you, this is a little bit about how this time together will go. I'll talk for about 20 minutes. We'll do a little activity together in that time too. And then I'll suggest something for you to journal about. So if you do have a pen and paper nearby, that'd be great. And you'll have about 5 minutes to write, and then we'll have breakout rooms where you'll have a chance to share with someone else, and then we'll all come back and we'll close with the last 10 minutes of having a group conversation. So that's the arc for what we'll be doing together. It was in probably 2006 when I was in a poetry class with Jude Jeanette, a woman who's turned out to be an incredible heart hero for me. And she had just finished writing a poem a day for 30 days, which at the point sounded impossible to me. I couldn't even imagine it, writing a poem every day. And she suggested to this class that I was in that we try it. And she said, it would help if you have 2 partners for accountability, 2 more partners, because one person most likely will flake out. So at least 2 of you are going to stay with the practice. And just commit to 30 days. So I found one woman who I loved deeply and asked her, and she said, yes, let's do it. And then I asked another woman who I barely knew, but wanted to know. And she said, I'll think about it. But she said yes. And then the 3 of us wrote for 30 days. And the most remarkable thing happened. I call myself now a failed perfectionist, because I'm not so good at being a perfectionist anymore. But at the time, perfectionism was important enough to me that when I would sit down to write, if I didn't think I was going to write something good, then I wasn't going to write at all. And that meant I actually didn't write all that much. But by writing every day, I gave myself permission, because it seemed pretty obvious I couldn't write a masterpiece every day. So I gave myself permission to write what showed up, and to, as William Stafford famously said, to lower my standards. It was the most incredible gift. I didn't know at the time how much wanting to get things right was interfering with with everything, actually, with the writing practice, and with every other part of my life too. And I think this is probably the most exciting thing that showed up for me then out of this daily writing practice, is that I learned that it wasn't actually just about writing a poem, that the poem, in fact, is a very small, low stakes playground where I can explore all kinds of things that have much larger ramifications in the larger world. For instance, in the poem, in real life, I don't want there to be much tension. Like, I'm actually really happy with peace, but a poem wants tension. The poem thrives on tension. And in fact, if the poem doesn't have tension, it will be super boring. So I got a chance to experiment all the time with how do I allow for opposition in the poem? And that, of course, plays out into how do I create a container in my life large enough to hold opposition? Or, in my family, especially with my children, of course, I'm trying all the time to keep things safe. But in a poem, the poem wants nothing more than to edge closer and closer and closer to uncertainty. And so it is that I didn't immediately learn this. After 30 days, I was addicted. I knew that I never wanted to stop. And both of my friends stopped, but I didn't. I knew after 30 days that what was at stake was much larger than the poems I was writing. What was at stake was that it changed everything about the way I was able to see the world. It changed the way I met the world, how I paid attention, how I got increasingly curious, how I was willing to be increasingly vulnerable, how I wanted to show up more and more and more authentically. And so I thought I would share with you what evolved over time is the 4 promises that I make to myself. And like I say, they began as 4 promises that were just about poetry. But as this process has evolved, I realized it was really about how to be alive. It's the same, it's why I would never stop writing now. Those 4 practices are: 1, I will write. 2, it doesn't have to be good, but it has to be true. 3, I can't know the ending when I start. And 4, I will share it. And I'm going to go through those one at a time and talk about how they actually play out and how they ended up having a kind of profound spiritual invitation along with them. So the first one, I will write, is really just learning to show up. And I think maybe there's nothing more important than that, especially in this process. I mentioned already, I didn't want to write anything at all if it wasn't going to be good. And by just telling myself, I will write, my friends, I could keep that promise to myself every single day. And what it involved then was opening up the door to curiosity, was knowing that at that point early on, I would start looking for the poem at the very beginning of the day. I was like, all day long, I'm like, where's the poem? Where's the poem? Where's the poem? Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? And that was kind of thrilling to just always be on the lookout. I'll say, by the way, that's changed. It's changed a lot, in fact, that even though I used to feel like I was always in search of the poem, now I feel more like when my invitation to myself to show up is actually an invitation to show up with the blank page blank. And I know how intimidating a blank page used to be. And perhaps that's the same for you. Perhaps you've also felt very intimidated by a blank page. But there's a thrill in me now when I meet that blank, that I know that anything can happen. Anything. And I trust that something will. And over time, and I guess that's why we call it a practice, I trust that something will show up. So I thought I would share a poem I wrote just this week about what happened when I showed up. And it was very difficult to find words. It was right after the Boulder shooting. And that's, it's 6 hours away, but that's in my state. And it's just one more incidence of our hearts breaking open again and again and again, and there's a hopelessness that begins to build. And so I wrote this poem, and I think it's in the chat at the very beginning of the chat if you wanted to read along. This is how to meet this difficult day. Today, the prayer is words I can't yet find. Words that flit away like spring juncos, like chickadees. Today, the prayer I wish for is not the prayer that finds me. Less like the perfume of a fully bloomed flower, more like the dank and fusty scent of spring. Some days, when I forget how to pray, if I listen with my whole body, the world reminds me how what is used up, spent, is also a vessel for the holy. As dry leaves become a nest, as bare branches hold the sunrise. I think what was most profound for me about that experience was knowing that I could even write in that moment about feeling unable to write. That's also valuable to know that sometimes even so, we're using words to describe an experience. We know that the words fail us. And in that moment, there's an invitation to speak less and listen more, to notice the branches outside the window holding up the sun, and know that there's that holy now. There's that holy now that was in that song. I thought it'd be kind of fun, by the way, if in the chat bar, if you would write something you saw today, anything you saw today, anything you listened to today, anything you smelled today or tasted today, and it could be just a phrase. And if some of you would go ahead and type those things into the chat bar, it would be wonderful. Then we'll just turn it into a little quick impromptu poem. Oh, this is good. Great. It's starting. So when I wrote that particular poem, I was writing it off of a poem that I had read by Cheryl DeMesnil called Today's Sermon, in which the whole poem, Today's Sermon is, and it was just a list. So we're going to create a group poem right now based on that. Today's sermon is a flock of white geese. Today's sermon is the trees outside my window bursting into birdsong. Today's sermon is bright yellow lemon, hummingbirds, my face in a mirror. Today's sermon is my frustration. Today's sermon is a groundhog. Today's sermon is the first smell of spring. Purple fronds unfurling beneath the wet leaves, exposed by my fingers in the garden. Today's sermon is an embarrassing gap in knowledge. Today's sermon is a snapping turtle taking its first breaths. Today's sermon is a child's smile. Hey, that was a pretty awesome group poem. Nice job, you guys. And you can see right there that is as easy as it is to write a poem. A poem can be as simple as just a gorgeous list, just like that. So, promise one, I will write. And kind of the spiritual counterpart of that is show up. The second promise I make to myself every day is it doesn't have to be good, but it has to be true. And that one is an invitation toward authenticity. And I mentioned already a little bit about that perfectionism, how it got in the way. And what I can promise you that I found out as I wrote and write and continue to write and write is that nobody cares about clever. No one, not me, not anyone, what we care more about than anything is for a real connection with someone else. And I became very aware that if I could just write the next true thing, that was what I wanted more than anything. That's how I could learn. That's how I could be in real service to the poem, instead of thinking that I knew more than the poem did, so I could make it good. If I let the poem know more than I do, and if I put myself in service to the poem by writing the next true thing, I will always discover something new. And by showing up authentically, it allows me, to not have to worry. If I can write a true thing, then if you read it, chances are you've experienced something similar. And so then you'll say, oh my goodness, that's right. And that makes, it's a genuine connection at that point. So I thought I'd share a poem about that discovery of wanting to be amazing and instead leaning into what's the truest thing. And it starts with a poem from Hafez that was a version by Daniel Ladinsky. Why just ask the donkey? Why just ask the donkey and me to speak to the donkey in you, when I have so many other beautiful animals and brilliant colored birds inside, all longing to say something exciting and wonderful to your heart. And I remember that's just a small part of the poem, but I remember falling so deeply in love with that I made up a song to go with it, right? Because I wanted to show up as a brilliant animal, as a brightly colored bird. And it feels really good to do that until it doesn't feel true to the moment. And it was in one of those moments that I wrote this poem, The Precious Matter of Love. Dear, though I have come to you as many other beautiful animals, as long-necked swan, as Persian cat, though I've worn for you my most vermilion feathers and sung to you in the voice of the bird that always disappears just before it can be named, and though I've come to you as tigress, as heron, please do not refuse. My donkey, clumsy, stubborn, all tug and bray and gray and dull and smelling of dung. Of course, you would want to turn away, but please, if you can, meet me this way when I'm awkward, stepping on my own feet, yours too. Meet me when I'm unlovable, and love me then. Though I stink, though I'm not graceful, nor easy, nor lovely, but strong. And here I am, nuzzling your hand as it opens and aspiring to be nowhere but here. Dear, we're nothing more than flesh for life to push through, and I'm done hiding inside the bright wings. Or for that matter, beneath a dun hide. It's only a heart touches another heart. Here. Here's mine. It's the most important thing I think I learned from writing poems, was that to show up honestly was more important than showing up good. My third promise is that it doesn't have to be, is that I can't know the ending when I start. And if I do, because sometimes we do, I have to write right past it, or I have to write a different ending and write a different ending and write a different ending. So I'll write the one that I think I know, and then write another and another and another. And in this way, I learned two very important things that I feel like have something to do with spiritual practice, which is one, how important it is to lean into uncertainty. And I mentioned that just a little bit earlier. And the other is there are so many ways to do it right. There are so many ways to do it right. It's such a gift when I let myself lean into that and trust that way. Oh, I'm not sure what's happening with the screen, but if you can still see me, that's awesome. And if you can't, then maybe just listen to my voice. Oh, there I am. Hi again. There it is. There's that little bit of uncertainty. It just showed up at just the right time. Who could have predicted that would happen? Thank you for making that craziness happen, universe. The last promise I make myself, I will share, is about leaning into vulnerability, is about creating community and opening up to that. And I often think about that. It's a crazy thing for me to share my first drafts with everyone on a daily basis. What the heck? That's a crazy thing to do. And yet there's nothing more wonderful than the perfume of vulnerability, how that openness. And here's a poem that kind of explores that. It's called That's Right. I showed up naked for tea. I know it's not the proper thing to do. I was a bit surprised myself to find I'm wearing nothing more than this orange scarf. I had on more clothes when I left the house. At least it is soft, the scarf. At least it is warm, the tea. You don't have to pretend you don't notice. I won't pretend either. We'll just go on. It is a bit awkward, as most things are at first, but maybe by the time we pass the cream, you will have slipped out of your own button-up shirt, your judgment, your embarrassment, your belts, and maybe it will be so wonderful, this lack of anything between us, that by the time we get to the bottom of our cups, we'll wonder why we would ever spend an afternoon or an evening together any other way. I wanted to give you an opportunity to think a little bit yourself about vulnerability. In that poem, I showed up naked for tea. Obviously, it was a metaphor. My mother was very glad to hear that. She was really worried when she read that poem that maybe she wrote me a note, Rosemerry Gale, I hope this is a metaphor. And I assured her it was. I want you to think about it metaphorically too. Think about, when are you comfortable to show up your most vulnerable? Where are you able to be most unmasked, to be most yourself? Where is it very difficult to show up vulnerable? Where does it seem impossible to be more naked? And then I guess the other invitation to that is to think about, if you weren't going to go completely naked, but if you could just show up a little bit more vulnerably, what would that look like? So we're going to take about 5 minutes to write about that. Notice, where are you very comfortable being vulnerable? Where does it feel almost impossible to be vulnerable? And what would it look like in that impossible place if you were just a teeny bit more vulnerable? We'll just go ahead and be quiet for about 5 minutes. So at 43 after, we'll come back from writing. You may want to consider asking questions. And about 30 more seconds if you want to finish the sentence you're writing. I'm going to welcome you to come back. We're going to go into breakout rooms where you'll have a chance to speak with 2 other people. There should be 3 people-ish in your breakout room. And before we do that, I want you to please go ahead and repeat after me these words that I've adapted from Bill Plotkin of the Animas Institute. Just go ahead and say them out loud or to yourself. Are you willing to listen? With the ears of your heart to the other voices of yourself speaking. You'll each have about 3 minutes. David, would you go ahead and put us into breakout rooms, please?
So welcome back, everyone. We'd love to spend, and I hope it's okay with everyone if we run a little bit longer tonight, if we go a little past 8. We'd love to just hear from some of you what that experience was like in your breakout groups, what it was like sharing, how you might stretch into a bit more vulnerability, and what it was like listening to your companions in those rooms share. The easiest thing, since there are so many of us across screens, is if you would virtually raise your hand if you would like to share. And the way you do that is on the newer versions of Zoom. The raise hand is under the reactions button along the bottom of the Zoom screen. In the older versions, it is at the bottom of the participants window. So who would like to share? Eileen.
The minute I did that, I said, did I just do that? So I wrote that comfortable brings me to a place with a friend, and he was so open and trustworthy that I felt totally seen and was fully joyful. Not all vulnerability is sad and fragile. That day, I sang my lungs out as I swung in the hammock. He saw me and loved me. And I just love the simplicity of that. And to me, that's exactly what pops up out of poetry. That's sort of, I mean, I didn't know vulnerability and joy was going to pop up. So that was kind of cool. And then the impossibility, I said, is with dishonesty or denial, danger, danger. Now I tell the truth in that moment, which gives me a little space, enough space to be me, and at the very least, not suffocate. So anyway, I really enjoyed it. It was lovely, and my group was lovely, and I vote for a weekend.
I think, Eileen, I love that comment about how it gave you space. You know, I think that I noticed that too, that the spaciousness that's available in that authentic moment, in that when we show up as ourselves, that's so beautiful the way you said it, creates that extra room to breathe, right? Beautifully said. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jen.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. So I said this to the two beautiful beings I got to be in the breakout room with. Full disclosure, when you guys mentioned breakout rooms, I almost hit the leave button. I almost hit the leave button. And then I thought, what, trying to channel my inner Diane. It's like, what a wonderful opportunity to be vulnerable. And, when it came to the question of what is it, where is it difficult or impossible to show up as vulnerable? I said here and there and there too, and there, a raw exposed nerve. But by the end of our little group, these two strangers, I didn't know them, I hadn't met them before, not only let me in, I let them in, and we left as friends, right? Or left a little more tender, a little more open. So I still have the sweaty palms and the, the beating fast heart about sharing that out loud. But I'm really glad I stayed.
Oh, I am too. And I'm also so glad you shared all of that awareness about wanting to leave, right? I think I know the truth of that, right? And like, even when you said it, there's that spaciousness that Eileen was talking about, like, because I guess most of us have that same feeling, like, okay, I could just exit now and that'll be a lot safer, right? And I can't tell you how many times that happens in a poem where all of a sudden I'm about to meet the scariest thing that shows up. This is why it's so important to not know the end, right? It's because you were about to designate the end and escape. And that's what I think when we know the end of the poem, it's like that. It's like we create a little escape route for ourselves before things get really vulnerable and juicy, right? And before we allow ourselves into that moment of connectivity and even revelation that part of us doesn't want to meet, but then the part of you that stayed, right, was in this moment such a gift to you. It said, yeah, let's do it. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Jen. Pam.
Hi there, I'm Pam. I write every day, poorly, and sometimes wonderfully. And I'm very vulnerable in my journal. And I've had something terrible happen like the last 2 weeks that I won't go into, but I realized I was so glad when Rosemerry, you suggested asking questions, because I was writing just a bunch of stuff that was kind of expose, and like I was just doing this around it. And then you just kind of came in and go, hey, it might help to ask a question. And as soon as I did that, it just really made me be more honest about what was happening for me, and where I am super vulnerable, and I definitely don't let people in. And I just hide in my house, which is easy to do now because of COVID. Thank you very much. And so this was really good. It was great. Thank you so much. And my group is wonderful. They were two really sweet women who actually work for your organization. So I can't wait to come to New York someday and see it with my own eyes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pam.
And Pam, I just want to thank you for bringing that up about the questions. And I know that's the piece I was talking about, uncertainty, and then letting in that question. Like so often when I'm writing, I feel like I'm supposed to have some kind of answer and it's supposed to be wise. And I can't live up to that ever. So knowing that I can ask a question and that might be the truest thing is to meet that question, and gosh, it just opens things up again. Yeah, thank you for sharing that experience.
Wonderful. Thank you. Salima.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm just so excited. I just started writing poetry on a kind of regular basis last September. And you just opened even to me a whole new world, because I felt the way that I had been writing poetry was that, I'll be in a meditation or something in the morning, and then a sentence would come, and from that, I just started writing. But I like the idea of having an idea, already having an idea. So I wrote about being naked. I said, I am naked when I cry. I don't know why the tears come. Sometimes I am naked when I just say hello to myself in the presence of a mirror of my imperfections. I am naked when I sing, expecting to be seen in a dirty spot that refuses to be clean. I am naked when I see myself. I am always naked.
Oh, gorgeous. It's kind of like a manifesto. That was fabulous.
Thank you.
That's great, Salima. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Stella.
Hi there. I have to say, I did not like the questions at first, and I will follow with, I am not a poet. I really don't write poetry, but I do. I am not a writer, but I write. I hate journaling, even though I encourage my clients in spiritual guidance work to journal. So go figure. So when you encouraged us to do this, to be vulnerable, I said, okay, that's what I'm here for. And as I said to you in chat, this is such good prep for the retreat that I'll be doing the end of the month. So thank you. But this is what I wrote. If I were vulnerable, I would be gossamer winged, light and translucent. My breath would be free and full. How will I use my wings? Will my translucency reveal too much?
And I love how you left it with those questions without needing to answer them.
Oh, right? I don't have the answers.
Of course you don't. We don't. I love to, Stella. It makes me so happy that you would just say, yeah, I didn't like that. I didn't want to. I love noticing that myself too. Like, no, where do I dig in with my no? But the fact that you softened some, like what part of you softened into yes? Like, how did that even happen?
Well, being an educator in the past, I used to give directives in the middle of teaching art. And I'd say, now, don't do what I just told you to do, but do this. And that's what I felt like when you said that you threw that little curve in there, which changed my process to go in a slightly different direction. And it wasn't to please you. It was that prompt to look at something in a different manner.
Mm. Mm.
Do you know how much I love that too? It wasn't to please you. I think of this all the time, when people, I always encourage people, don't think about the reader. You're not writing this for them. If you are, then we've already, that's that wanting to be good, right? But the moment we lean into that, this is what's most true for me. There's always juice there, right? It's always so exciting. That's where the practice is.
Yeah.
Gorgeous. Thank you, Stella. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
And for those gossamer wings.
So I think Stella's was the last hand that was up. So I think that perhaps, even though we could go on and on and on with this evening, and I'm sure that we will have another time with Rosemerry. This is such a joy. Thank you so much for what you've brought to all of us. And we're going to close our evening with another piece of music that is a celebration of this world that we are so ready day after day after day to fall in love with.
I see trees that are green, red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow, and they'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, oh, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of the people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? But they're really saying, I love you. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of the people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how but they really say, yeah, I love you. I see trees of green and red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I think to myself, ooh, what a wonderful world.
And Rosemary, I think you said you had one final poem
Oh,
that
sure.
you could share with us for the evening.
All right. Well, this one is in the last year. And I think a lot about how none of us know what anyone else is going through, and we're all going through a lot. This is watching my friend pretend her heart isn't breaking. On Earth, just 1 teaspoon of neutron star would weigh 6 billion tons. 6 billion tons is the equivalent of every animal on Earth, including the insects, times 3. 6 billion tons sounds impossible. Until I consider what it is to swallow grief. Just 1 teaspoon, and one may as well have consumed a neutron star. How dense it is, how it carries in it the memory of collapse. How impossible to move then. How difficult to believe anything could ever lift that weight. There are many reasons to treat each other with great tenderness. One is the sheer miracle that we are here together on a planet surrounded by dying stars. And another is none of us can see what anyone else has swallowed. Thank you. Thanks, Diane. Thanks so much to David for being our host. I appreciate that so much.
Yes, thank you, David. Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you, everybody. If you would like to unmute yourselves and just say a quick good night.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Good night. Thank
Good
you
night,
so much.
everybody.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come back.
Thank you very much.
Aloha.
Absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The cacophony of love.
Breakout
Thank
party.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Boy.
Thank you.
Thank you.